Have you ever felt trapped in a cycle of problems that seem never-ending? What if I told you that this might be a direct test from God to strengthen your faith? That's right. Sometimes God allows us to face challenges beyond our control, and the reasons may surprise you. If you want to discover the 7 signs that God is testing your faith and how to come out stronger than ever, stay with me, because this video will open your eyes to a reality that many ignore. Feeling lost, not knowing which path to take, is an experience that can shake anyone. But on the spiritual journey, these feelings of uncertainty and confusion do not arise by chance. Many times, they are signs that God is shaping our trust and calling us to depend more on Him. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6 advises us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." When clarity is lacking, it is a direct invitation to surrender control to God, knowing that He sees what we cannot yet see. In these moments, it is common to question why things are happening. Why is this happening to me? Why can't I see a way out? But it is precisely in the absence of immediate answers that we are challenged to walk by faith and not by sight. God, in His infinite wisdom, sometimes leads us to these places of uncertainty so that we can learn to trust completely in Him. It's like being in a dark room, feeling the walls until you find the door. You don't know what's ahead, but you trust that God's light will illuminate the right path. The truth is that while we are in this place of uncertainty, every decision feels like a gamble, and the fear of making a mistake can be paralyzing. But this is where resilience comes into play. Resilience is not just moving forward with absolute certainty, but also embracing doubt with courage, knowing that God is by your side. This feeling of confusion is not the end but a process where our faith is refined. The Bible is full of stories of people who faced uncertainty and emerged stronger, with renewed faith and a deeper understanding of God's character. Sometimes, God allows us to face this confusion to draw us away from our own wisdom and closer to His scriptures. It is an invitation to dive into the Bible, to seek comfort and direction in His words. In moments like these, verses such as, "Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path," Psalm 119 verse 105, become more than comfort. They become a compass in the fog of doubt. Clarity may not come immediately, but the trust that God is guiding our steps brings peace to the heart. It is interesting to note that when everything is clear, it is easy to move forward. But when we are in the midst of confusion, it is there that our trust in God is truly tested. These are the moments when we learn to wait and depend on God's timing. Uncertainty is uncomfortable, but it is also a tool that God uses to strengthen our relationship with Him. It's not about knowing all the answers but trusting in the one who has them. And this trust is what leads us to navigate these murky waters with the certainty that, in the end, God is in control. Trials and difficulties that suddenly arise can seem like true earthquakes in our lives, shaking everything we thought was stable. No one likes to face these moments, but in truth, they have a much greater purpose than simply destabilizing us. James 1 verses 2 to 3 teaches us to consider it pure joy when we face trials of many kinds, because they produce perseverance. It's curious to think that God uses exactly these difficult moments to shape us, strengthen our faith, and prepare us for what He has in store. It's as if each challenge is an exercise for our spiritual endurance. When we face difficulties, we are forced to step out of our comfort zone and trust God more intensely and genuinely. It's easy to trust God when everything is going well, but it's in the storms that we really learn to put our faith into practice. Imagine faith as a muscle. It only grows when it is tested. Every unexpected difficulty is an opportunity for growth, even if, at the moment, it seems impossible to see anything positive. The Bible is filled with stories of men and women who faced intense trials and came out stronger. Job lost everything, but his faith remained unshaken. Joseph was sold into slavery, imprisoned unjustly, but never lost hope in God's promises. These stories show us that difficulties are not the end of the line but a chapter in a much larger plan. God is always working behind the scenes, even when everything around us seems to be falling apart. This perspective helps us face each trial with courage. Often, difficulties serve to teach us valuable lessons that we would not learn otherwise. They reveal our true strength, expose areas where we need growth, and bring us closer to God. Amid trials, we are reminded that we are not in control, but we can fully trust a God who is sovereign over all things. It is in this place of vulnerability that we find true resilience, not based on our own strength but on the strength that comes from God. We have all gone through moments when it feels like our prayers are simply floating into the void, unanswered. God's silence can be disconcerting, especially when we are seeking direction or comfort amid difficult situations. Psalm 13 verses 1-2 expresses this feeling well, when David cries out, "How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" It is a universal experience in the walk of faith, where God's silence seems to test the limits of our patience and trust. However, this silence is not a sign of abandonment. On the contrary, it can be an opportunity to develop a deeper and more resilient faith. God is not indifferent to our struggles. He hears every word, even when he seems distant. Sometimes, silence is God's way of teaching us to wait, to trust in him more than in the answers we desire. It is in this interval between the request and the response that our faith is purified, like gold in the fire. We learn to rest in the certainty that God is in control, even when everything around us is in chaos. It is important to remember that God's timing is perfect, although it is not always aligned with our expectations. God's silence can lead us to question, to seek more, to delve deeper into the scriptures and prayer. It is not a divine game of hide and seek but an invitation to deeper communion. When God is silent, he is calling us to trust in him in a way that goes beyond immediate circumstances. It is an invitation to remain steadfast, knowing that he is working on our behalf, even when we do not see or understand. During these periods of silence, our natural reaction may be frustration or despair. But, as in any relationship, moments of silence can strengthen bonds when approached with patience and love. God knows our hearts better than we do, and he knows exactly what we need and when we need it. Sometimes, what seems like silence is actually preparation for something greater that he is about to accomplish. Our task is to remain faithful, continue praying, and trust that, at the right time, he will reveal his will. God's silence also teaches us to value his answers even more. When we finally see the answer come, it carries much more weight because we went through the process of waiting and trusting. Every prayer that seems unanswered is actually a seed planted in the soil of patience and faith. It is a process that reminds us that God is not a vending machine for instant requests, but a loving Father who cares for every detail of our lives. And while we wait, he is shaping us and preparing us to receive his answer in the best way. When we draw near to God and seek to live according to his principles, it is common to notice an increase in temptations, especially in the areas where we are most vulnerable. This increase is not a coincidence but a strategy of the enemy to divert us from the purpose that God has for our lives. In 1 Corinthians 10 verse 13, we find the promise that, "No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it." This divine guarantee reminds us that no matter how intense the temptations are, God always offers us an escape. Temptations present themselves in many forms, from small compromises that seem harmless to decisions that can compromise our integrity and faith. When we notice that temptations are intensifying, it is a clear sign that we are on the right path, but also a warning to redouble our vigilance. The enemy knows our weaknesses and tries to exploit them to draw us away from God. Therefore, it is essential to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus and remember that he himself faced temptations and emerged victorious, leaving us a perfect example of resistance. It is interesting to note that temptations often arise when we are tired, stressed, or vulnerable. It is in these moments that we need to reinforce our trust in God and anchor ourselves in the scriptures. Jesus, when tempted in the desert, used the word of God as his main weapon against the enemy's attacks. In the same way, we are called to combat temptations with the truth of the scriptures. Every time we resist, our faith is strengthened, and our resilience grows. It is a constant battle, but one worth fighting, knowing that God is on our side. Moreover, it is vital to recognize that being tempted is not a sin. Yielding to temptation is what separates us from God. Jesus himself was tempted but did not sin. This shows us that facing temptations is part of every Christian's journey, and that being tempted is not a sign of spiritual weakness but an opportunity to demonstrate faithfulness to God. When we resist, we are reaffirming our commitment to Him, and showing that we value His will above any momentary pleasure that temptation may offer. Temptations also have the power to reveal what really matters to us. Often, they expose areas of our lives where we need more discipline, self-control, and most importantly, dependence on God. They challenge us to question our priorities and make choices that reflect our faith. In every decision to resist, we declare that we trust God to satisfy and fulfill what temptations promise but never deliver. It is a constant exercise of faith, where each resistance is a victory that glorifies God. Waiting on God is one of the most challenging lessons in spiritual life. We all want quick answers, immediate solutions, but God operates in His own time, and that time is always perfect. Isaiah 40 verse 31 reminds us, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." This waiting is not passive. It is an active waiting, full of trust and expectation that God is working behind the scenes, even when we see nothing happening. It is an exercise of faith and resilience, where we learn to trust in divine timing above our urgencies. During these periods of waiting, it is common to feel impatience or even discouragement. It seems like the clock is ticking against us, but it is precisely there that God is shaping our character and strengthening our trust in Him. Waiting teaches us to depend completely on God, to understand that His promises are fulfilled at the right time, and that He is never late. Every moment of waiting is an opportunity for growth, a chance to deepen our relationship with God and develop trust that goes beyond immediate circumstances. Waiting on God is often a test of patience. We are tempted to take shortcuts or solve things on our own, but these quick fixes rarely bring lasting peace. True peace comes from knowing that God is in control, that He is faithful to fulfill what He has promised, even if it takes time. The process of waiting is like refinement, where our motivations are tested and purified. God uses these moments to prepare us for the blessings that will come, so that we can receive them with a grateful heart and strengthened faith. It is interesting how, in the Bible, we see so many examples of people who had to wait. Abraham waited years for the promise of a son. Joseph waited in prison until it was God's time to elevate him to power. Even Jesus waited until he was 30 years old to start his public ministry. These stories remind us that waiting is not a sign of inactivity or wasted time but part of God's plan to shape us into the image of Christ. It is a reminder that what God has for us is worth the wait. While we wait, we can find comfort in the Scriptures and fellowship with other Christians. God's Word is a solid foundation where we can rest our anxieties, knowing that He is faithful. Waiting teaches us to let go of control and trust that God is orchestrating everything for our good. It is a daily practice of handing over our plans, expectations, and desires to God, trusting that He knows what is best for us. And while we wait, He renews and strengthens us, preparing us for what is to come. Living according to biblical principles in a world that constantly pressures us to compromise can be a daily challenge. There are moments when compromising our values seems like the easiest path, whether to avoid conflicts, please others, or simply to relieve pressure. However, these moments of pressure are actually tests of our faithfulness to God. The story of Daniel's 3 friends, who refused to worship Nebuchadnezzar's golden statue even under the threat of being thrown into the fiery furnace, Daniel 3 verses 16 to 18, is a powerful example of resilience and commitment to God above all. When we find ourselves under pressure to compromise our values, it is easy to rationalize small concessions. Just this once, it won't hurt, everyone does it. But in reality, these small concessions can open doors to greater compromises and eventually lead us away from the purpose that God has for our lives. Every decision to maintain our integrity, even under pressure, is a testimony of faith and trust in God. It is a reminder that, even when the narrow path seems more difficult, It is there that we find true peace and divine approval. The pressure to compromise values can come from many directions: the workplace, relationships, society in general. It can be subtle, like a bad joke we feel compelled to laugh at, or explicit, like an offer of promotion that requires ethical compromise. In all these moments, we are called to remember that our identity is in Christ and that our first loyalty is to Him. Jesus said that, "Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven." Matthew 10 verse 32. Keeping our faith firm, even under pressure, is a way to confess our loyalty to Him. Being faithful to biblical values, especially when the world is going in the opposite direction, requires courage. It is like swimming against the current, knowing that the path is more difficult, but it is the right one. God calls us to be light in the midst of darkness, and this light shines brightest when we refuse to give in to what is popular, easy, or convenient. Each time we resist the pressure to compromise our values, we are strengthening our character and testimony as followers of Christ. We are telling the world, and ourselves, that our commitment to God is non-negotiable. The feeling of losing control is unsettling, especially for those who like to have everything planned and organized. However, these moments when everything seems to be slipping from our grasp may be exactly the scenarios God uses to teach us to truly trust in Him. Psalm 46 verse 10 tells us, "Be still, and know that I am God." This is a call to let go of the reins and allow God to take command. When we are at the wheel, we limit possibilities to what we can see and predict. But when we hand over control to God, we make room for the extraordinary. Losing control may seem like a failure or a sign of weakness, but it is actually an opportunity to exercise our faith. God never promised that we would have control over all circumstances, but He promised to be with us in all of them. When everything seems uncertain, it is an invitation to stop fighting against the current and trust that God has a greater plan. The peace that surpasses all understanding comes precisely from this place of surrender, where we recognize that, no matter how hard we try, there are things that are simply beyond our reach. Instead of seeing the loss of control as a failure, we can view it as a moment of surrender. It is an opportunity to recognize that our efforts, however good, have limits, but God's power is limitless. When we stop trying to control everything, we make room for God to work in ways that go beyond our imagination. Letting go of control is not easy, but it is an essential step to experiencing the fullness of divine peace and provision. This surrender is an act of faith, where we trust that, even if the path is not clear to us, God sees every detail and is orchestrating everything for our good. Furthermore, these moments reveal where our trust truly lies. It is easy to trust in God when everything is under control, but when the ground seems to disappear beneath our feet, that is where true faith is tested. Losing control does not mean that God has lost control. On the contrary, it is a reminder that He has never lost command. Like the conductor of a symphony, He is adjusting each note to create something beautiful, even if at the moment the sound seems confusing and disordered. Our task is to trust the conductor and follow the rhythm of His lead. Often, it is precisely in the loss of control that we experience God's greatest miracles. When all we can do is wait, He manifests in ways that leave us in awe. It is in these moments that we realize that true security is not in having everything under control but in trusting the God who controls everything. Each time we let go of control, we are actually taking a step of faith toward God's perfect plan for us. It is a process that teaches us to rest in God and to recognize that He is more than capable of handling all our concerns. Now it's your turn. Which of these signs resonated most with you? Have you experienced any of them? Leave your comment below and share your experience. Your story might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. And if you want to keep learning and strengthening your faith, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. That way, you won't miss any of the upcoming videos that will help you grow spiritually and live with more confidence in God. We are in this journey together.